same paragraph, there must be a connection. Rebbi said, Rebbi was Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rabbi Yehuda the prince, the editor and compiler of the Mishna, the leader of the Jewish people in the 2nd century of the Common Era, who was recognized as one of the greatest rabbis that ever lived. He would probably, if you had to pick on 10 of the greatest, he very likely would be included in that list. And in chapter 2, he focuses, as he says at the very beginning, which is the straight path that a person should choose for himself. What does he mean by the straight path? It means what is the ideal approach, not what the Torah tells us to do. But we're talking not about what we're supposed to do, but what kind of approach do we have to have? What's the best approach? And the answer is one which is an honor to the person adopting it, and on account of which honor accrues to him from others. The simple understanding of that is that the attitude should be that what you do should not just be good for you and elicit certain kind of appreciation for yourself for what you're doing, but it also brings appreciation from others. In other words, look at what you're doing and they say how beautiful it is what you're doing. The Hebrew word that they translate here as honor is also more precisely translated as beauty. Something that is beautiful for yourself, but also is beautiful for others. Either it's good for others or others appreciate the beauty. It's not just something that you do that no one in the world knows about and no one else appreciates, but people start to appreciate you. One of the things that in the Torah is v'ahavta, you shall love God. That's the simple translation. But there's another translation, a Talmudic translation, that you shall make God beloved. You should love God only, but you should make God beloved by other people. When a person who is a believer in God, a person who loves God, acts in a very negative way, is not polite, is not doesn't know how to deal with other people, then what do people say? People say, look what religious people do, and look what they believe in, and they don't behave properly. They're not nice. So God does not become beloved, but when a person who believes in God behaves in an admirable way, what that does is it gets people to say, this person is so beautiful, such a beautiful personality. Where do they get it from? They get it from their belief in God, because they have a God that guides them and leads them and inspires them. So it makes God beloved by others. This is another way of saying it, that whatever you do, you should do in a way that people say, look at this person, look how beautiful this person is, and they attribute it to the person's belief system. And the way it should work is that if a person believes in God and believes that God wants you to behave in a certain way, then you'll behave that way. Now, there are people who call themselves very religious, and they don't behave in a way that brings honor to themselves or to God or to Judaism. And that's the opposite of what Rebbi is talking about. So that's what Rebbi taught last week. Believe it or not, even though it's about 2,000 years since he said these words, when we learn Torah, it's as if he's saying it right now. That's how it says in the Midrash that a person should study Torah in a way that every day it's like new. For some people, it's literal. They don't remember what they learned the day before. They forget everything. One of the things that happens when you get older, that every day it's like learning Torah anew. But what it really means is not that, God forbid, it doesn't mean literally that we should forget, so that every day we could start as if we never learned it before. But it means that every day it should be so vital and so alive that it's as if we got it the first time. We're excited about every time we learn Torah. And I knew people who you can see that literally, who every day their study of Torah, even though they had studied that same passage 100 times, they study it with such relish, with such excitement, with such enthusiasm, with such love, that they feel as if it's a gift that they got that day and they never had it before. At any rate, Rebbi's first teaching tells us what's the optimum form of behavior that brings beauty to yourself, enhances your own beauty, and elicits beauty from others as well, or is beautiful to others as well. Then he says something that seems to contradict what he just said. And you'll find this very often in Talmudic teachings, that a rabbi will say something, and then he'll say something else that appears to contradict what he just said. But it's not a contradiction, it's a qualification. He's qualifying what was said before, because, and this is the whole idea of balance. In society, we find people who latch on to a certain cause, and they take it to extremes, and they forget about every other cause, and they do terrible things in the name of their cause. Like we're seeing today with people who are destroying property because they don't agree with a person's politics. And if they're so conscientious and they think what that person does is wrong, then you have to be exceptionally righteous in every respect. You can't be a fanatic in only one area. If you want to be a fanatic in every area. Balance it. But if you don't balance it, what it is really is just your ego, that it's out of control. When people latch on to one cause and to the exclusion of everything else, you have to be very suspicious where it comes from. Does it come from I'm a conscientious person, I really care, I'm very concerned about this, and I really want to help? Or is it coming from my ego? I want to show that I have power. And that's unfortunately what you're seeing happening in this society today. And you see that on all sides. I'm an equal opportunity offender. So it's true about every political persuasion and every community and every philosophy. So when you see a contradiction, the first thing that enters your mind, the rabbi is obviously not contradicting himself from sentence 1 to sentence 2, but what he's doing is creating a balance. What is the first statement? You have to do things in a way that brings beauty to others. And now the second statement is that you shall be careful with a light commandment, a light mitzvah, as with a grave one. I don't like the translation grave one, as a heavy one. For you do not know the reward for the fulfillment of the commandments. So, what is the connection between these two sentences? They're lumped together in one Mishna. There must be some connection between them. So this is the one way of explaining it. I mentioned last week that the difference between chapter 1 of Ethics of the Fathers and chapter 2 is that chapter 1 focuses on the idea that God gave us the commandments. We got the Torah from Sinai. It also emphasized how we should not look for reward. We should do things primarily because these are the commandments that we received from God at Mount Sinai. In the second chapter, the focus is the opposite focus. The focus is how we do mitzvahs because they give us beauty. They're elegant, they're edifying, they're refining, they elevate us, they make us beautiful, they beautify us. They make people into beautiful people, not just obedient people. So while the foundation of Judaism is God told us to do this, we do it whether we do it or not, whether it makes us feel better or not, whether it resonates within us or not, whether it enhances our dignity and our beauty. We do it because God said so. There's an expression, a Hasidic expression, if God would tell us to chop wood all day long, which has no value and no purpose, and we would never get any feeling from doing it. We never get excitement from doing it. You know, they tell the story of a peasant who was cutting grain with a sickle, and a wealthy man asked him, how much do you get paid an hour? I get 1 ruble an hour. He says, could you come to my house and do the same motion with the sickle, and I'll pay you 10 rubles an hour. He says, sure, 10 rubles. He says, where do you want me, what grain do you want me to cut? No, I don't want you to cut any grain. I just want you to stand in my living room and make believe you're cutting grain. After 15 minutes, the guy said, I can't do this anymore, but I'm giving you 10 rubles for it. He says, but I'm not accomplishing anything. It doesn't resonate with me. And if God would tell us to just make believe that we're cutting grain, we would still do it because it's God telling us, not just a rich man who's giving us 10 ruble. But the good news is that's followed up by chapter 2. Chapter 2 says you have to love doing what you're doing. It's not enough doing it because God told you to do it. Because if you do it because God told you to do it, that same God wants you to love it as well. God wants you to feel the beauty in it, that it's aesthetically pleasing. It's not just something you do obediently. You do it because it resonates with you. It penetrates, and you get excited about it, and you feel the beauty. You feel how it enhances who you are. That's the focus of Rebbi's first teaching, that you can take a path where you just do things because God said so, and have no other, doesn't bother me whether it makes me feel better or makes me a better person. I just have to do it because God wants me to do it. Rebbi says, no, that's not the most elegant way of doing things. That's not the ideal way of doing it. You have to do it because you feel the love, you feel the inspiration, you feel the beauty, you feel the aesthetic value of it. So then one would think, okay, then I have to decide which mitzvahs I want to do. Yes.
There are things, right now I'm living with my elderly mother, and there are things that I can't stand, but I do because it brings her pleasure.
And you get okay. So let's say you don't enjoy doing it at all. It's still a mitzvah, and sometimes there are things in life that are not going to be pleasing to us no matter what.
I would have thought that the same would carry over to Hashem. He wants me to do X. I don't take pleasure in it. I don't see the value of it, but he's asked me to do it. And if it's pleasing God, I do it.
Right, because you accept God as your son, as your leader, and therefore you want to do what God wants you to do. That's chapter 2 says you should try also to make with the mitzvah that you do enter into your value the mitzvah, and you appreciate and you love the mitzvah, and you get excitement from doing the mitzvah. To the extent that is possible. Every person has their limits, but you have to do as much as you can do, not just to do it because God said so. Now, the truth is that there are 3 categories of commandments, of mitzvahs. The 3 categories are called, in Hebrew, Mishpatim, judgments. Those are rational laws. Don't steal, don't kill. Those are laws that if God didn't tell us, most normal human beings would have thought of it themselves, that you shouldn't steal and kill. Those are the civil laws that are rational. Then there are laws called testimonies, Edot. Like Passover is a testimony. It's a remembrance of the Exodus. Shabbos is a remembrance of the creation. There are commandments that Tefillin are remembrance of the Exodus, among other things. It remind us of things. We would not have thought of them ourselves, but they make sense once they were commanded to do them. Then there are mitzvahs called Chukim, the mitzvahs that we can't understand. And the reason why God gave us those is to tell us that even if you don't understand, you're supposed to do it anyhow. Things that we understand, that we would never go to doctors, we would never fly in a plane because we don't understand how how a plane flies, and I don't understand medicine the way a doctor understands, but we trust the doctor. He had his education, and we say, for better or for worse, the doctor knows a little bit more than I know about medicine. I'm going to trust him. But God, of course, is infallible, so if he tells us to do something, that's the right thing, and we have to do it. But then God says, I don't want you just to be limited to doing things because I said so. I want you to appreciate, to feel the beauty in what you're doing, and it should actually enter into you and refine you and make you a better person. That's chapter 2. If you follow chapter 2, you might say, you know what? This mitzvah I like. This mitzvah resonates with me. That mitzvah, I'm not so excited about it. I won't really do it with much enthusiasm. I might skimp on it. I might cut corners with it. So that's what the second statement of Rebbi is, that don't be careful with a light mitzvah. Light over here means a mitzvah that you don't really feel is that important. You don't feel the urgency of that mitzvah. To what you consider a light mitzvah, be as careful as you would with a heavy mitzvah. For you don't know the reward of the fulfillment of the commandments. You don't know what a mitzvah is really all about. So there are two points over here. Point number one is stand for anything. Why should we gloat over the greatness of that individual? So the Rebbe sensed that this man didn't appreciate the lesson. So he said, I want to see your diamonds. I'm interested in seeing your jewels. So he shows him the diamonds, and the Rebbe looks at each diamond, and the man points this one. This one is the real beauty. This one is very, very valuable. And the Rebbe says, it doesn't look like anything to me. He says, yeah, Rebbe, you have to be a connoisseur. And the Rebbe turns to him and says, when it comes to a human being, when it comes to a Jew, you have to be a connoisseur. Not everyone is a maven, to use a Hebrew word, and appreciates other people. We're not Hebrew word, and appreciates other people. We're not connoisseurs when it comes to a mitzvah. What we might think is not a heavy mitzvah is not so important. It could be the most important. We don't really know, and therefore treat them all equally. So even though the Rebbe's first statement was you should get to really identify with a mitzvah and really connect to it, he's saying you don't take that to an extreme that you're going to start judging which mitzvahs are meaningful, which mitzvahs are not meaningful. So that's how he qualifies the statement before. Don't take it to an extreme. Balance it with appreciating that every mitzvah is beautiful and every mitzvah has value. The second point is that even if it doesn't have any value to you, you do it because God said so, and that's the greatest reward. The greatest reward is when you do something to connect to God. Even if it doesn't make sense to you, even if it doesn't bring joy to you, even though you don't get excited about it, the fact that you're doing God's will is the greatest thing. In a relationship, in a very good relationship, where the other person tells you and asks you for a favor, do you sit down and say, 1 second, if the favor was very important, I'll do it. If it's not so important, maybe I won't do it, or I won't hurry to do it. If you really have a solid relationship with someone, you don't weigh and measure the person's requests. Their request, if that's what they want, then you'll do it. There was a famous chassid, his name was Ruvain Dunin, a very special individual, and the Rebbe had a very close relationship with him. And once the Rebbe asked him to do something, and the Rebbe started to explain why he wants him to do it. So this chassid said to the Rebbe, don't tell me why you want me to do it. I want to do it because you asked me, because of the reason that you're giving. So I don't want to hear the reason. It's not important for me. So that's what it means over here, that not only you can't be a judge, you're not a maven, you're not a connoisseur, which mitzvah is heavy, which is light. You do it because it's the greatest reason for doing it is because God said so. And that's our relationship with God. What is a light mitzvah and what is a heavy mitzvah? I mean, where do those terms come from? The Talmud actually uses those terms with regard to certain mitzvahs. The heavy mitzvah, the Talmud says, is honoring parents. That's the heaviest mitzvah. That's the most difficult mitzvah. The Talmud tells stories of how certain rabbis would give their parents such respect, and the other rabbis would say, you haven't even done a fraction of what you have to do to fulfill the mitzvah perfectly. What's a light mitzvah? The light mitzvah the Talmud gives as an example, that if the Torah gives you a commandment that if you happen to chance upon a nest and the mother bird is crouching over its eggs or its chicks, and it doesn't belong to anyone, so you want to take it, you can't take the chicks without sending away the mother. You can't do it while the mother is there. It doesn't cost you anything. You weigh sometimes people will weigh a mitzvah by how much it's going to cost. If it's going to cost me a lot of money, it's a hard mitzvah. If it's cheap, it's easy. Well, it's a cheap mitzvah. Another example given in the Talmud, and it's based on a story, and I'm going to try to connect the story to what we're learning. The Talmud tells, it's an incredible story. The Talmud tells a story of the future. When Mashiach comes, and the Jewish people will be given their reward for all of what they've accomplished and all the suffering that they went through, and the nations of the world, Rome and Persia, the nations will come to God and says, God, what about us? Why don't we get that reward? So God says, well, you didn't do the mitzvahs. He says, well, you didn't give us the mitzvahs. So God says, well, I'll give you one mitzvah, a very easy mitzvah. And what was the easy mitzvah? Build a sukkah. Build a sukkah doesn't require much expenses, although there are very beautiful sukkahs that can cost a lot of money these days. But that's the commercialization of a sukkah. But the sukkah itself, the basic sukkah, if you have two walls, you just have to put up another partition to make it a third wall, and you get some branches. It doesn't cost anything. You put it on your roof. It doesn't cost very much. So God says, do the mitzvah of sukkah. This is a story about the future. So they build their sukkahs on their rooftops, and all of a sudden it gets so hot that it's impossible to sit in the sukkah. So they leave the sukkah, and on the way out they kick it. So the Talmud asks, and so God says, you see, you couldn't even do one easy mitzvah. So the Talmud asks, if the sukkah is so unbearably hot, and you're a Jew, you don't have to sit in the sukkah on sukkahs. So why would God judge them based on the fact that they left the sukkah? So the Talmud answers that if a Jew has to leave the sukkah, he doesn't kick it. It's the kicking of the sukkah. So there's a lot of depth to this story. The fact that it was a light mitzvah, that was the test. A light mitzvah means that you don't take the idea of the mitzvah seriously. You measure the mitzvah by how easy it is for you, or how appealing it is to you. And as soon as it's not appealing, you'll kick it. You show you have no real appreciation for the idea that God gave you an opportunity to connect to Him. You're in the relationship. You say, why don't you want to marry me? Because I don't love you. I don't feel anything about you. Well, that's what they were showing in this story, that they wanted the mitzvah so they can get the credit for the mitzvah. It was not part of any other consideration. Yeah.
Can I just ask quickly, in the Talmud, when they use the words light and heavy, what are the words that are used in Hebrew or Aramaic?
Light is kala.
And what are the derivations of that?
Kal means light. That's his.
Light means light.
No, not the light.
This is what I'm.
No, light as opposed to heavy.
Light from a lamp.
Minor, or some might want to translate as minor or trivial. And the other word is chamura. Chamura is heavy. Weighty.
Thank you.
Important or not so important. This connects to the Passover. It's right before Passover, so I would be remiss if I didn't find some connection to Passover. Everyone knows of the 4 sons, the 4 children who ask questions, or 3 of them ask questions. The 4th one doesn't know how to ask. What's the Chacham, the wise son? What is his question? So the words are in translation. What are the testimonies, the statutes, and the judgments all about? And you're supposed to tell him you're not supposed to eat anything after you finish the Seder, eating of the Paschal lamb, which is the dessert in the olden days. You're not supposed to eat anything afterwards. What's the question and what's the answer? It's a very enigmatic piece of information. So the Rebbi gives the following explanation. This wise son doesn't understand why there are different categories of mitzvahs. This wise son is truly wise, and he says, you do a mitzvah because God said so. Why is one mitzvah called rational, one is called semi-rational, one is called us? We do it because God said so. That's the ultimate. Why is there this division among mitzvahs? And what is their answer? What's the reason you can't eat anything after the Seder? After you eat the last piece of matzah, now we don't have the Paschal lamb, you eat the Afikoman, the last piece of matzah. After that, you can't eat anything. You just drink another 2 cups of wine, and that's it. No eating. What's the reason for that? The reason given is that you want the taste of the matzah and of the Paschal lamb to remain visible. You don't want to get rid of the taste by eating something else. What does that symbolize? That God says, you're not only supposed to do a mitzvah because I said so, I want you to get the savor, the taste. I want the taste to linger on. I want you to feel the beauty of the mitzvah. I want it to refine you, to enter into you, and something that you could really appreciate. It shouldn't just be done because God said so. And the truth is, the same God that says we should do a mitzvah because He said so, says we should also love to do the mitzvah. So if you're into God, you're going to do it that way as well. So that's the ultimate balance, to do it because God said so and to do it because it resonates within you. You feel it. You get excited about it. Another explanation given is by a Rebbi who came from a city in Ukraine near Kiev called, what's the name of this city that Buffalonians are from? Sukkah, or in that area. And it's a nephew of the rabbi who lived here in Buffalo. So I have his commentary on Ethics of the Fathers. And he's a nephew of the rabbi who's buried here, with thousands of people annually come to the gravesite here in Buffalo. Buffalo became a major destination, Jewish destination. So in his commentary, he says that Rebbi is referring to the last Mishna of chapter 1, which said that the world exists because of 3 things: because of justice, truth, and peace. And Rebbi's question, which of the 3 should we focus on? Which of the 3 is the most ideal approach? In other words, even if we can't do everything, which should we focus on? Which should we concentrate on, even if it's at the expense of the other 2? Which should we specialize in? And the answer is peace. Do things that bring beauty and dignity to yourself and to others. In other words, do things that bring people together, that people are appealing to people, and it brings you closer to others. So Rebbi here again has to qualify that. You shouldn't think that it should be at the total expense of the other 2. If you're going to be someone who has peace with others, but you like to lie and perform injustice, that's not good either. Don't weigh them. Don't think just because I just told you to focus on peace that the other 2 you can just dismiss. No, the other 2 are very important, and don't judge their importance based on what I just told you. Then there's a third explanation of the words here by the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, going back to the word kala, which means light as opposed to heavy, the Baal Shem Tov took the word careful. The Hebrew word for careful is zahir, which means careful, but it also comes from a word in Hebrew that means light, like the Zohar. The principal work of Jewish mysticism is the Zohar, which means the book of radiance, of splendor, of light. So the Baal Shem Tov says that what Rebbi is telling us over here, not just he should be careful about a light mitzvah, light as opposed to heavy as in a heavy mitzvah, but that you shall bring light into a mitzvah. You should not just do the mitzvah in a dry way, in a mechanical way. It should be a mitzvah done with light. There's this famous story told about the Baal Shem Tov's principal disciple and successor. He was known as the Magid, the preacher of Mizrich. His name was Dov Ber. And he was an opponent of the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov had many, many adversaries, and most of them became his followers and his disciples when they met him. So the story is, how did the Magid of Mizrich become a disciple of the Baal Shem Tov? The Magid of Mizrich was an incredible scholar, both Talmudic scholar and Kabbalist as well. And he came to the Baal Shem Tov, and he the Baal Shem Tov asked him to explain a Kabbalistic concept, a very, very difficult Kabbalistic concept, very intricate, very, very deep, very profound. And the Maggid Mezritch explained it in a breeze. It was easy for him because he was such a towering giant. And the Baal Shem says, no, that's not the way. You did it without any light. I'll repeat it. And he repeated it the exact same way, the Maggid, the exact same explanation, and the whole house filled up with light. Does it mean physical light? I don't know. I wasn't there. Believe it or not, I'm not that old. But it was, they felt the spiritual light. And the Baal Shem Tov was all about light. Baal Shem Tov loved physical light as well. The story is told that he used to go to the river to immerse himself in the mikveh. Instead of a mikveh, they used the river, and it was the middle of the winter, and the place is full of ice. So they would break the ice, and he would immerse himself. But he would go in the early in the morning when it was still dark. So he would have his attendant bring a candle, and the candle extinguished. He was there a long time. It was about to extinguish. So he asked him, what should I do now? He says, take the icicle and light the icicle. And the icicle illuminated. The Baal Shem Tov loved light. He didn't like darkness. Actually, it says that when, it's medical science knows this also, that light causes a person to be happy. It says in the Talmud that when you pray in the shul has to have windows. And I don't mean the computer, windows for the computer. I think the Talmud was more into to Apple, to Mac. But it means you're supposed to have light in the shul. Why do you have to have light in the shul? So one of the rabbis in Poland, Rabbi Nassim Levin, who was a member of the Polish parliament, and he was murdered by the Nazis. So in his commentary of the Talmud, he says, because there's another requirement of prayer. You have to be in a happy mood. God doesn't like depression. He doesn't like sadness. He likes people to be happy. So you want to talk to God. God wants to see the smile on your face. And how do you get happy if you're not? You open the windows and you get light. You see the sunlight. It brings joy to a person. That's his explanation. The Baal Shem Tov loved light, and he always emphasized the importance of bringing light, spiritual light, and physical light is a manifestation of something spiritual as well. So he says you should bring light into every mitzvah, because you don't know the reward for mitzvahs. What does it mean you don't know the reward? It's not that you don't know it because you're ignorant. You can't measure the reward. It's so infinite. It comes from a place that is beyond understanding and beyond explanation. Then he goes on, go a little further. You shall calculate, or he says reckon. Also reckon the loss that may be sustained through the fulfillment of a commandment against the reward accruing thereby, and the gain that may be obtained through the committing of a transgression, weigh that against the loss entailed thereby. In other words, the simple understanding of this is that sometimes you're called upon to do a mitzvah, and you figure out, if I do this mitzvah, it's going to cause me a loss, a financial loss, or some other physical loss, and you won't do it. Well, calculate the reward for doing the mitzvah. If you realize what the reward is, that the reward is not measurable, how would you give up a reward that is so great for something minuscule? It reminds me of a parable that's told about a Jewish merchant who would buy grain from a peasant, and he would fill up a whole wagon load of packages of grain. But in order to know how many bundles of grain were loaded on the wagon, so every load that was put on the wagon, they would put down a kopek, a penny. And at the end, it would be, let's say, 100 pennies. They realized there was 100 packages of grain, and whatever, let's say, was 10 rubles a package, they would have to give 1,000 rubles. So meanwhile, the peasant sees the shiny kopecks, and when the merchant turns around for a second, he says, I'm going to steal, and he grabs all the pennies and puts it in his pocket, thinking that he just robbed the rich man of all those pennies, of 90 pennies. And the rich man caught it in his eye, says, you fool, you just stole 90 pennies, but you lost 900 rubles. Because for every penny that was there, he gave him another package. That's what happens with people. We sometimes rush to gain a little benefit here, a little benefit there, and don't realize that we lost much more. One Hasidic Rebbi once gave this explanation. He said, if someone comes to a Jew, a practicing Jew, and he says, I'll give you $1 million, but I want you today to not put on tefillin today. You put on tefillin every day. Today you won't put on, you'll get $1 million. Any Jew that I know that practices Judaism would not take the $1 million. Maybe he tried to convince the guy to give him the $1 million without giving up the tefillin, because the $1 million still speaks to people. If it didn't speak to you, it wouldn't be a big deal. But if a person is not willing, let's say you have a practice, you visit someone who's ill and needs your help every day, and someone tells, I'll give you $1 million. It's a bad example, because with $1 million you can hire 100 people to do the thing that you're doing. But if it's something that no one else can do, and you're going to neglect doing it to get $1 million, no decent person would do it. Or a better example, I think more people would identify with this. If someone tells you you have a large family, you have 10 children, I'll give you $1 billion, you just give me one of your children. Would you take it? That's it, $1 billion. What you can get, you have 9 other children. You need all 10?
You may have to think about it.
Jack Benny would have said that, yeah.
Rabbi Greenberg, we said on the story where, I don't know if it was the Rebbi, but someone was described, he was asked about his day, he said, what did you do today? And he went to the airport, and it was when they would charge by the weight of the suitcase, and he said, I put my foot on the scale to lessen the amount that I would be charged. And the instructions he was given was to go back and correct that if we accept things as they are, as the laws are, and we honor what is presented.
I think it might be referring to a true story by a certain rabbi, prominent rabbi, who went to Israel to lecture. And he did something like that, to put his foot on the scale or something, and when he returned, the Rebbe asked him for a report of what he accomplished in Israel.
This is the story.
And he told the Rebbe where he spoke. The Rebbe says, well, what happened before that? He says, well, before that I spoke in another place. And what happened before that? And he kept on going back, and then he said, before that I flew to Israel. He says, yes, but what happened before that, before you flew on the plane? And he realized that the Rebbe was asking him about what he did, and he realized that what he did was wrong. That's when a person forgets about the importance of a mitzvah. That's the whole point over here. But the main point over here is, if you would not take $1 billion to give up a child, that means a child is worth at least $1 billion. So treat your child today as if you just won $1 billion. If you won the lottery with $1 billion, you would probably smile a lot more. You wouldn't be frowning. So now you're looking at your child, look at him that way. And the same thing with every mitzvah. Every mitzvah, if you wouldn't give up the mitzvah for $1 million, $1 billion, then treat the mitzvah that way. That's what he means, that you shall calculate the loss of the mitzvah, the loss of that you incur through doing a mitzvah by the reward. The reward is infinite. You can't really measure it. And the same thing with doing a transgression. If someone says, well, I did something wrong because, as in this case of the rabbi, he saved himself $100, let's say, but that $100 was not worth it because he lost $1 million or more. You can't even measure if he would have calculated the loss we would never do anything wrong if we would calculate the loss. That we could have made so much more if we observed the law. One other point, just one other point about doing the minor mitzvah. Let's say a mitzvah is really minor in terms of its importance, measured by, even by the Torah measures certain mitzvahs. So like I said before, the Sukkah is a light mitzvah, honoring parents is a heavy mitzvah. But that's only true when you're measuring the mitzvah the way it is now against another mitzvah the way it is now. You never know what happens to a mitzvah. There's something about a mitzvah like a drug. You start taking heroin, and I'm not advocating that, but if you start taking heroin, what happens after a while when you keep on taking it? You become addicted, and you can't detach yourself from it. Mitzvahs are addictive. We'll learn that later on in Ethics of the Fathers. So when you're doing a light mitzvah, you think it's light. I'm only doing a small mitzvah. It's not gonna hook me. It could hook you. And whereas the heavy mitzvah may not be as addictive. So you really can't measure anything by the value of something the way it seems to you now. Yes, this is cheap and this is expensive, but you never know. The cheap thing could lead you to other things, and you can win the lottery by buying $1, a ticket worth $1 or $2, whatever it is. So you can make much more just by a small investment. So you should never try to measure things by the way they appear, because they may be totally different in the outcome when you look at what the consequences of your action. Okay, talking about mitzvahs, there's a mitzvah on Passover not to possess chametz. Chametz is defined as anything that has grain mixed with water that wasn't guarded and baked under special supervision. That's called chametz. Matzah is where you have flour and water that was put together in a way that you made sure it was baked before it could become leavened, before it starts to rise. So since the Torah says we're not allowed to eat chametz, we're not allowed to derive any benefit from it, and we're not allowed to even own it. So it's easy not to eat it and not to benefit from it. You just put it away. But how do you not own if you have a whole cupboard filled with vodka? With pasta, they're all chametz. So how could you not own it? So the simplest way would be, well, it's not the simplest actually, but it's the most, is to get rid of it, to throw it out, or give it away to someone who's not Jewish. But that's not always practical. So the Jewish custom developed that community members ask their rabbi to be their agent to sell it to a non-Jew for the duration of Passover. So when you put it in your cupboard, it's legally not yours anymore, so you're not owning it. You certainly can't use it. That would be not only violation of using chametz, it would be theft as well, because it really doesn't belong to you during that period when it's sold. So I have contracts over here. All you have to do is fill it out, and when you fill it out, you should know that you're giving me the ownership of your house and your car and every worldly possession that you have. No, only kidding.
Rabbi Gedalia from Jerusalem, who we spoke with, offered this wonderful talk in 1994 in Israel, where he said, when you clean out the chametz in the corners and the recesses of your cupboards, there's a metaphysical brush in your mind, cleansing the corners and crevices of your mind.
Right. The night before Passover, and this year 2 nights before, we searched for the chametz. How long does it take to search physically? Even if you have a large house, the house was cleaned before that, so and you put everything away. So it's almost like a routine thing. It should take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a half hour. The story is told that the Alter Rebbi, he had only one room, a one-room house. He was living in poverty. It took him all night long searching for the chametz. So obviously he was not just searching for a piece of crumbs of bread or for some pasta. He was searching for in a spiritual way.
The Talmud also says, according to the effort is the reward.
Well, he wasn't looking for the reward, but that's true.
No, yeah.